abundant grace of the Self manifest as Ramana, we are conducting the Satsang from Ramana Center for Learning. And we begin the Satsang with a prayer by Srimati Sapna Ganesh, followed by the chanting of Muktaka trayam by Sri Nandakumarji.
Dakshinamurti Sarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Ramanacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Vande Guru Paramparam Vande Guru Paramparam Shuklam Varadharam Vishnu Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantaye Angitam Bhuvanam Yasya Vachitam Sarvavangmayam Aharyam Chandrataradi Tam Namah Satvikam Shivam. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana to everyone.
Ekam Aksharam Rudinirantaram Bhasati Swaram Nikyate Hridaya Kuhara Madhye Kevalam Bhavamatram Yaham Aham Iti Sakshat Atmarupena Bhati Nudibishamahasasvam Chimvata Majjata Pavana Chalanarudha Atmanishto Bhakti Deham Brahmaya Jadatmaham Aham Bhaktirnatasyasyato Naham Tattata Bhavashukti Samaye Siddha Saddha Om Bhavaya Upadesa Drishta Manishta Soham Spurtikaya Arunachala Shivaha Vaibhav Soham Spurtikaya स्वयं नमो रमण
We now have the chanting of verses from Upadesa Saram by Ashwini Balaji and Uma-Ashwini.
Namo Ramana. Vayurodhanat liyate mana jalapakshivrotasadanam chittavayava chitpriyayutaah शाखयोर्द्वयी शक्तिमूलका लय विनाशने उभयरोधने लयगतं पुनर्भवति नोमृतं प्राणबन्धनात् त्वीनमानसम् एकचिन्तनात् नाशमेत्यद नष्टमानसोत्कृष्टयोगिन कृत्यमस्ति किं स्वस्थितिं यत दृश्यवारितं चित्तमात्मना चित्वदर्शनं तत्त्वदर्शनं मानसं तु किं मार्गणे कृते दैवमानसं मार्गार्जवात् वृत्तयस्त्वहं वृत्तिमाश्रिताः वृत्तयो मनो विद्याहं मन अहमयं कुतो भवति चिन्मत ऐपतत्यहं निजविचारणम् अहमिनाशभाज्यमहं तया स्फुरतिर्स्वयं परमपूर्णस
Namo Ramana. We now have Ramananjali music by Radha, accompanied by Vaibhav, followed by Pratibha Sundaresh.
Namo Ramana to everyone. Today we have selected a song written by Sri Ramana Dasa Sadananda. The Kannada translation is done by Sri R.N.J. Gopal and the music is by Sri H.K. Narayana. It is in the Ragam Shuddha Dharnyasi set to Aditadam. Pannagabharana Ramana Sharano Ramana Sharano Ramana Sharano Pannagabharana Ramana Sharano Ramana Sharano Ramana Sharano Pannagabharana Ramana Sharano Tarume Abhaya Volava Harisi Nalide Shirade Charana Irisi Pannagabharana Ramana Sharano Taruve Abhaya Volava Harisi Nalive Shirade Charana Irisi Pannagabharana Ramana Sharano Ihani Parani Surani Narani Jnanavu Pranavu Tranavu Shivani Ihani Parani Surani Narani Jnanavu Pranavu Tranavu Shivani Kodu Jnanani Hridayade Nelesi Kodu Jnanani Hridayade Nelesi Manasanu Kavida Irulanu Harisi Pannagabharana Ramana Sharano ಮನುಜನ ದುರ್ಬಲ ನೀಗಿಸು ಈಶ ಮೋಹವ ತೊಲಗಿಸು ಹೇ ರಮಣೇಶ ಮನುಜನ ದುರ್ಬಲ ನೀಗಿಸು ಈಶ ಮೋಹವ ತೊಲಗಿಸು ಹೇ ರಮಣೇಶ ಚರಣದ ಸ್ಥಳವನ್ನು ನೀಡುತ್ತ ಹರಸು ಚರಣದ ಸ್ಥಳವನ್ನು ನೀಡುತ್ತ ಹರಸು ಗಜ ಚರ್ಮಾಂಬರಧರನೆ ಉಮೇಶ ಪನ್ನಗಾಭರಣ ರಮಣ ಶರಣು ಹರನೇ ಶಿವನೇ ಗತಿಯೇ ಮತಿಯೇ ನೆಲ ನೀರ್ವಾಯು ಅಗ್ನಿ ಆಕಾಶ ಹರನೇ ಶಿವನೇ ಗತಿಯೇ ಮತಿಯೇ ನೆಲ ನೀರ್ವಾಯು ಅಗ್ನಿ ಆಕಾಶ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿ ನೀನೇ ಲಯವೂ ನೀನೆ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿ ನೀನೇ ಲಯವೂ ನೀನೆ ದಾರಿ ತೋರಿಸು ನಮಗೆ ಮಹೇಶ ಪನ್ನಗಾಭರಣ ರಮಣ ಶರಣು ರಮಣ ಶರಣು ರಮಣ ಶರಣು ಪನ್ನಗಾಭರಣ ರಮಣ ಶರಣು ರಮಣ ಶರಣು ರಮಣ ಶರಣು ಪನ್ನಗಾಭರಣ ರಮಣ ಶರಣು. ನಮೋ ನಮಃ.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. This is a Kannada translation of Sri Muruganar's composition. ಶರಣು ಬಂದೆನೋ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಎಂದೆಂದಿಗೂ ನಾನು ನನ್ನೀ ಬಾಳಿನ ಕತ್ತಲೆಯ ಪರಿಹರಿಸೋ ಭಾನು ಶರಣು ಬಂದೆನೋ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಎಂದೆಂದಿಗೂ ನಾನು ನನ್ನೀ ಬಾಳಿನ ಕತ್ತಲೆಯ ಪರಿಹರಿಸೋ ಭಾನು ನಿನ್ನ ಲೀಲೆಗಳೇ ಹೇಳುತ್ತಿವೆ ನನ್ನ ಒಲಿದೆಯೆಂದು ನನ್ನನ್ನು ಕಾಯಲು ನಿರ್ಧರಿಸಿ ಕಾಡುತ್ತಿರುವೆಯೆಂದು ನಿನ್ನ ಲೀಲೆಗಳೇ ಹೇಳುತ್ತಿವೆ ನನ್ನ ಒಲಿದೆಯೆಂದು ನನ್ನನ್ನು ಕಾಯಲು ನಿರ್ಧರಿಸಿ ಕಾಡುತ್ತಿರುವೆಯೆಂದು ಶರಣು ಬಂದೆನೋ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಎಂದೆಂದಿಗೂ ನಾನು ನನ್ನೀ ಬಾಳಿನ ಕತ್ತಲೆಯ ಪರಿಹರಿಸೋ ಭಾನು ಕಷ್ಟಕ್ಕೆ ನೂಕಿ ರಕ್ಷಿಸುವ ಸಂಚುಗಾರ ನೀನು ನಾವಿಕನಿರದ ನಾವೆಯ್ದು ದಡಕ್ಕೆ ತಂದೆ ನೀನು ಕಷ್ಟಕ್ಕೆ ನೂಕಿ ರಕ್ಷಿಸುವ ಸಂಚುಗಾರ ನೀನು ನಾವಿಕನಿರದ ನಾವೆಯ್ದು ದಡಕ್ಕೆ ತಂದೆ ನೀನು ಶರಣು ಬಂದೆನೋ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಎಂದೆಂದಿಗೂ ನಾನು ನನ್ನೀ ಬಾಳಿನ ಕತ್ತಲೆಯ ಪರಿಹರಿಸೋ ಭಾನು ನನಗೂ ಅರಿಯದ ಪೂರ್ವದಲ್ಲಿ ನನ್ನನ್ನು ಉಳಿಸುವ ಪರಿಯ ಯೋಚಿಸಿ ಹೂಡಿದೆ ತಂತ್ರವನು ಅರಿವೆನೆ ಗುರುವಿನ ದಯೆಯ ನನಗೂ ಅರಿಯದ ಪೂರ್ವದಲ್ಲಿ ನನ್ನನ್ನು ಉಳಿಸುವ ಪರಿಯ ಯೋಚಿಸಿ ಹೂಡಿದೆ ತಂತ್ರವನು ಅರಿಯನೆ ಗುರುವಿನ ದಯೆಯ ಶರಣು ಬಂದೆನೋ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಎಂದೆಂದಿಗೂ ನಾನು ನನ್ನೀ ಬಾಳಿನ ಕತ್ತಲೆಯ ಪರಿಹರಿಸೋ ಭಾನು ಶರಣು ಬಂದೆನೋ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಎಂದೆಂದಿಗೂ ನಾನು ನನ್ನೀ ಬಾಳಿನ ಕತ್ತಲೆಯ ಪರಿಹರಿಸೋ ಭಾನು ಶರಣು ಬಂದೆನೋ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಎಂದೆಂದಿಗೂ ನಾನು ನನ್ನೀ ಬಾಳಿನ ಕತ್ತಲೆಯ ಪರಿಹರಿಸೋ ಭಾನು. ನಮೋ ರಮಣ.
Ramana. We continue the Ramananjali music offering with the song from Savitri Krishna, and this will be followed by a song from Revathi.
ध्याये शारद चन्द्र सुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्दे क्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टहराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्य योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् रमणेश्वरं ध्यायेत् रमणेश्वरं ध्यायेत् रमणेश्वरम् हे ज्ञानविज्ञानसागर रमणाय नमः रमणाय नमः रमणाय नमः एक ही मंत्र है सबका रमणाय नमः रमणाय नमः रमणाय नमः सतपथ का मंत्र है रमणाय नमः रमणाय नमः रमणाय नमः अलंकार वाणी का रमणाय नमः रमणाय नमः रमणाय नमः हे स्वयं स्वरूपा रमणाय नमः रमणाय नमः रमणाय नमः हे पूर्ण ज्ञान पूर्णानंद रमणाय नमः रमणाय नमः रमणाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री राम।
Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. We are meditating on the 30th verse of Saddarshanam. Gaveshanat prapya hridantaram tat patedahanta paribhungna shirsha athahamanyasphurati prakrishtham naham kritis tat parameva purvam. The ego falls crestfallen when one inquires, "Who am I?" and enters the heart. Then another I throbs unceasingly by itself. It is not the ego, but the self itself, the whole. The self always shines in the heart, bright and clear. Whenever something is questioned in the world, we get clarity. If this is the case of the world, which is just an illusion, what about the reality? When questioned, it reveals itself bright and clear. The throb of aham spurana becomes clear, slowly revealing itself, the truth, the self. I present to you a song written by Sadhun Swami, Kannada translation by J.H.P. Acharya, music by Srimati Sulochana Natarajan. दये तोरिसु रमणेशा सर्वेशा रमणेशा दये तोरिसु रमणेशा सर्वेशा दये तोरिसु रमणेशा अरुणाचल शिव ज्ञान प्रकाश सुरनायक नूत ज्योति विकास अरुणाचल शिव ज्ञान प्रकाश सुरनायक नूत ज्योति विकास ನಾನ್ಯಾರೆಂಬುದು ತಿಳಿಸುವ ಜ್ಞಾನಿ ನಾನ್ಯಾರೆಂಬುದು ತಿಳಿಸುವ ಜ್ಞಾನಿ ಸನ್ಮಾರ್ಗ ಬಿಡದಿಹ ಸಜ್ಜನ ಪರಿಪಾಲ ನಾನ್ಯಾರೆಂಬುದು ತಿಳಿಸುವ ಜ್ಞಾನಿ ಸನ್ಮಾರ್ಗ
बिडदिह सज्जन परिपाल दय तोरिसु रमणेश कृपा दृष्टिगे काम विनाश करुणाकर गुरु रमणेश कृपा दृष्टिगे काम विनाश करुणाकर गुरु रमणेश अरुणाचल शिव तेजोमयने अरुणाचल शिव तेजोमयने अहमहमात्मा श्रीनटराजा अरुणाचल शिव तेजोमयने अहमहमात्मा श्रीनटराजा अहमहमात्मा श्रीनटराजा दय तोरिसु रमणेश सर्वेश दय तोरिसु रमणेश नमो रमण
Namo Ramana. We continue the satsang with the reading and the sharing by Sri Nandakumarji.
Ramana. In this, the reading part of the satsang, we once again go back to the work Fresh Discoveries, Western Seekers on Sri Ramana Maharshi, compiled by our founder president, Sri A.R. Natarajanji. We have been going through the account of Susan by under the authorship of her daughter Monica Bose. The account has been entitled The Hill of Fire. It began with a quote from the Bible: "He that is near to me is near to the fire." And it moved on to a quote from Chandogya Upanishad: "And the light that shines beyond, and the light that shines beyond which there is none higher, that light is the same as the light in the heart of man. Beautiful to see, and of great renown is he who knows this, And the author gives us a view of our mind which is subtle enough to see the traditional ways of worship, the present days of worship in the temple, the worship that is embedded in the architecture in our home, in temples, all around. Frankly, she is able to see the need for worship and the presence of the Supreme. Then she brings the account to seeing the one Supreme in this multiplicity of pointers through a paragraph, the last paragraph that we read last time. So we begin with the last paragraph of last time, where she takes us to the present nature of Arunachala and brings us back to the sadhana of the mother Susan. Exploring the dense forest on the northern side of the hill, we made the discovery of a temple which for some unknown reason had been abandoned by man and allowed to fall to ruin. Nature was reasserting itself, and a tree had pushed its way through the domed roof. We stood before the temple for some time, letting our imagination conjure up its deities and rites, but we did not venture in, since it was likely to have become a home for snakes, scorpions, or other beasts. The light filtered down to us through the foliage of the thick canopy of trees. When we found a place where we could look above it, we saw Arunachala very near, looking much more austere than from any other aspect, and steeply rising to its high brilliant peak pointing into the sky. We start today's account. Suzanne's favorite place for meditation was on a spur of Arunachala under the Bodhi tree that faced the Unnamalai tank. The large tank stood before a small shrine and had long stone steps that must once have been trodden by crowds of pilgrims. Now, we always saw it deserted. It was a lovely spot, especially at sunset when it was bathed in warm colors. There was no sound other than the constant susurration of cicadas, the vetilpuchi or the crich like that sound it comes, that alone is there in that forest where Suzanne sits for meditation. The occasional flap of the bright wings over treetops, or the lonely call of a quail. The atmosphere was replete with the spirit of highest endeavor, since in a Puranic story about the origin of Arunachala, this was where Parvati, the bride of Lord Shiva, performed the last part of her penance to atone for her sin, which can be described as an action of unbecoming of who she was. In a moment of play, she had put both her hands over Lord Shiva's eyes, whereupon he had withdrawn into himself in deep trance, thereby depriving her and the world of his sight. Parvati, determined to overcome the separation from her Lord, persevered for eons, and her tapas of mortification until she became all dried up and her body was reduced to skin and bones. Artists for centuries have depicted her in a state of extreme emaciation, fondly investing her image with qualities of sacrifice, devotion, and courage that lend beauty even to those who are most worn by the trials of life. In the end, in her search for a means of gaining back her Lord's attention, she came to Tiruvannamalai. She met there the sage Gautama Muni, who taught her how to make her thought of Shiva one-pointed like an arrow. After assiduous practice, her thought was at last able to pierce into Shiva's heart. Roused from his self-absorption, Shiva opened his eyes and saw her. To commemorate his return to awareness and love, he appeared as an infinite pillar of light and fire, thereby granting her the sight of ultimate truth. Knowing now that she has never been separated from her divine Lord, because she was inherently one with him, she merged into him as half his being. The pillar of light and fire is still there, we are told, but in the form of the hill of earth and stone called Arunachala, so that ordinary people may see it and be blessed in preparation for the final darshan, the direct perception of its true nature. Suzanne liked this story, perhaps because it bore some resemblance to the theme of one of her earliest dances. She was a ballerina. Suzanne liked this story because it bore some resemblance to the theme of one of her earliest dances, the invocation to Varuna, in which the maiden implores the god of the sky to see her lest she be yielded to death. To be seen by the reigning authority in her life had indeed always been important to Susan. Now she wanted to be sure that she had the attention of the Maharishi and that he would watch over her as masters do and guide her from ignorance to self-knowledge. Departure from Sri Ramanashramam. In the end of 1945, found Susan in an anxious and dejected frame of mind. Although she had been at Sri Ramanashramam for nearly 10 years, and in spite of the effort she had put into her spiritual practice, she did not feel that she had come any closer to being accepted as a disciple by the Maharishi. In fact, it seemed to her that the distance between the Maharishi and herself had increased rather than decreased during the previous couple of years. It added to her unhappiness that she was in frequent conflict with the Sarvadikari, especially over what she saw as discriminatory treatment of women at the ashram, though it must be said that their disagreements never became bitter or vindictive on either side. There was still no guest house for women at the ashram, although one would eventually be built mainly through the donations of some of the wealthier women devotees. Different regulations for men and women were still in force. Women there were not allowed to take the evening meal with the Maharishi, nor to sit facing him in the hall. When for a short time they were allowed to do so, that is to sit in front of him, they were allocated a place right at the back of the hall, behind the men. The Maharishi did not want the devotees to go against the rules made by the management. He himself observed them, although he could not always have been in favor of them. He did not engage in debate, since he knew that it only inflamed passion and led to endless argument. In controversial issues, he preferred to keep silent or to convey the truth through symbols. But sometimes he set an example, as he did by instructing women on a par with men, thereby establishing that they were as capable as men of reaching the highest levels of achievement. Indeed, his mother had been the first of his pupils to attain self-realization. Susan felt that she could have borne the pain of her situation with greater courage if she had been sure that the ordeal she was passing through was but a means to the end that her master had in view for her. But that was not on offer, at least not in a formal way. For the Maharishi, unlike other gurus, categorically declared that he was not a guru and that he did not give initiation to anyone. He agreed that initiation from the guru was necessary to lift a person from banal to spiritual life. But at the same time, he said the guru did not always declare himself to be one, and even that the guru did not necessarily appear in human form. When the Maharishi was told by a visitor that he was reputed not to have had a guru, he replied, "I might have had at some time or another. And didn't I sing hymns to Arunachala?" This low-key reference to initiation could not have been further removed from what Susan imagined about the marvelous act by which the master's supramundane power and knowledge were transmitted to his disciple, a concept full of beautiful imagery, sentiment, and inspiration, which she had cherished since her teens. Right from the right up, we are able to see that there is a lot of beautiful imagery, sentiment, and inspiration throughout this writing, throughout this account. The Maharishi's teaching was rather that initiation was the work of the subjective spirit within, of which the outer guru was a mere manifestation, Bhagavan's teaching is that the inner guru, is the one who, with the contact with whom, makes us mature enough, and the outer guru appears accordingly and pushes us towards the inner guru. The Maharishi's teaching was rather that the initiation was the work of the subjective spirit within, of which the outer guru was the manifestation. This broader definition of initiation makes it possible for me to ask myself whether Susan had not been initiated a long time before, when as a young girl she had felt the first stirring of inner intuition regarding the highest authority, after which the worldly life and its ambitions would never again hold any attraction for her. Since then, there had been other experiences which might have been the working of the spirit in herself. If she personally did not rate any happening that had taken place so far in her life as an initiation, it was because she could not see any positive change in herself resulting from it. Yet, when the Maharishi once commented that progress was not always known to the person in whom it had taken place, he surely meant that initiation could be the start of the gradual maturing of one's understanding, a quiet inner transformation that was not less real for not being as yet manifest. Bhagavan would say to many of his devotees, when Chadwick would ask him, after 5 years of stay here also, I don't see any progress in my sadhana, Bhagavan would say, how would you know? And why do you want to judge? One of Susan's good friends at the ashram was Major Alan Chadwick, an Englishman who had come to the ashram in 1935. In 1940, he went through a phase of doubt, wondering whether he had done right to stay so long at the ashram when it meant renouncing all ties with his country and family, if no initiation was to be got from the Maharishi. He therefore tried to obtain from the Maharishi an explicit statement as to whether or not he had disciples. The Maharishi's reply to his question was that since the Guru saw no difference between himself and others, he could not say whether they were disciples and that he was a Guru. But from their viewpoint of duality, since they saw all as different from themselves, the Guru-disciple relationship existed and the Guru bestowed initiations on them by look, by touch or silence. The Maharishi then added that to the devotee, the grace of the Guru was like an ocean. If he comes with a cup, he will get only a cupful. It is no use complaining of the niggardliness of the ocean. The bigger the vessel, the more he will be able to carry. It is entirely up to him. That is the teaching of Bhagavan in terms of initiation and grace from the Guru to Chadwick. Susan had never doubted the Maharishi's ability to bestow grace, but she had wondered why he seemed to withhold it from her. When he said that there was no limit to the Guru's grace and that it was all up to the devotee, she understood that the limit existed only in the devotee's mind and was conditional upon his or her knowledge of the Guru. For the devotee made the Guru in the image of himself and with his human limitations, whereas the real Guru was the immanent supreme being whose grace was infinite. On one occasion, the Maharishi had affirmed that the source of grace was within in these words: the moment you effect the subsidence or merging of the mind into its source, grace rushes forth as a spring from within you. Bhagavan has said, and she remembers, the moment you effect the subsidence or merging of the mind into its source, grace rushes forth as a spring from within you. Susan could grasp the Maharishi's reasons for not giving the initiation. However, understanding his teaching was not enough. She had to accept it to the point of totally surrendering her life and future to him without receiving any assurance that he would keep her in his care and her progress was in his hands. Major Chadwick had just made such an act of faith. He abandoned all thought of living in search of another Guru and would remain at the ashram even after the Maharishi's Mahasamadhi. In fact, until his own passing away in 1962. He had always felt a strong spiritual attraction to the Maharishi and said more than once, he is as a magnet to my metal. Now he surrendered himself unquestioningly to that force. The writer is so broad-minded that she's showing that another devotee has faced the same trouble about the need for initiation, the manifested initiation, but his faith and his jnana has overcome that. But her own mother is struggling with that. He is struggling in that sadhana, and it's a wonderful account even for her. It was more difficult for Suzanne to stay on. She had so much need of all that she had long associated with the idea of discipleship, guidance, and above all, the higher form of relationship of love that was said to exist between the master and the disciple. Undoubtedly, she also sought the valorization and confirmation of worth, which the master's acceptance of herself as his disciple would have meant. Moreover, she could not see that her sadhana had made her a better person, since she had come to a point when she harbored feelings of anger and bitterness. She had admired loftiness in her master. Now suddenly loftiness was too hard for her to bear. It was apparent to her, therefore, that in her present state of mind, she could not stay at the Sri Ramanashramam any longer. She had always had, and much more strongly of late, an impelling sense of urgency. Time was passing, and she was afraid that if she did not press on towards her goal, she would become incapacitated by illness or old age and lose the chance of achieving something worthwhile in her lifetime. Therefore, after much hesitation and soul searching on her part, she desired to go and visit another renowned guru of South India, Swami Ramadas, whom her friend Jean Herbert had described as the apostle of love. He had told her that Swami Ramadas gave the initiation readily to all who sought it. So she would go and ask him for it in the hope that it would help her. On 20th December 1945, she came to the ashram to take her leave of the Maharishi. Sorrowfully, she told him that she was going away. The Maharishi did not reply. But then something very strange and wonderful happened. For she saw the Maharishi as Dakshinamurti Swami, the divine inner guru who teaches the unutterable truth in the silence of the spirit. As she would write, when I was talking to him, his appearance changed, and I thought that Dakshinamurti was sitting before me. In the silence, I heard, there is no separation. All gurus are one. They are the indwelling self of everyone. I shall ever remain as the jewel shining in the lotus of your heart. I'll read that paragraph again. On 20th December 1945, she came to the ashram to take leave of the Maharishi. Sorrowfully, she told him that she was going away. The Maharishi did not reply. But then something very strange and wonderful happened. For she saw the Maharishi as Dakshinamurti, the divine inner guru who teaches the unutterable truth in the silence of the spirit. As she would write, when I was talking to him, his appearance changed, and I thought that Dakshinamurti was sitting before me. In the silence, I heard, there is no separation. All gurus are one. They are the indwelling self of everyone. I shall ever remain as the jewel shining in the lotus of your heart. The last paragraph goes like this. It seems that at this moment, the Maharishi's teachings and the Rinpoche's wisdom words. So when I went back to the account in that book, she has met the Rinpoche, a Buddhist Tathagata, many years ago, and in his presence also, she feels that there is a divine presence. It seems that at this moment, the Maharishi's teaching and the Rinpoche's words of wisdom, which were still deep in her mind, combined to take her beyond appearance and objectivity to an experience of the master within. Because she was seeking the experience of initiation from an outside master, but she herself is made to transcend that need and read the last paragraph. It seems that at this moment, the Maharishi's teaching and the Rinpoche's wisdom words, which were still deep in her mind, combined to take her beyond appearance and objectivity to an experience of the master within. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramana.
To experience that truth of the master within, Bhagavan tells us the simplest way is to practice self-enquiry, and he has simplified his practice by codifying it. Practice of self-enquiry, which is established way of practicing, Bhagavan has codified in a very specific manner, which is easy to understand and direct to follow. And what one needs to do, he says in another context, is to practice, practice, practice. So let us be guided in the practice today in this satsang by Sri Dileep Simha.
ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणेश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामज्जताव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्. Namo Ramana. We will commence the Atma Vichara by listening to Bhagavan's Upadesham. As usual, I will be reading from the Guru Vachaka Kovai. The chapter is Meditation on Truth. The topic blessed by Bhagavan is the greatness of the Upanishads. verse 509. For God, whose very nature is grace, ignorance is unknown. His lotus feet rests on the pedestal of true knowledge, and the golden sandals on his feet are the Upanishads. For the futile ego that is intoxicated with intellectual knowledge, the only worthy pursuit is to take upon its head those sandals, the Upanishad. I repeat, for God, whose very nature is grace, ignorance is unknown. His lotus feet rest on the pedestal of true knowledge, and the golden sandals on his feet are the Upanishads. For the futile ego that is intoxicated with intellectual knowledge, the only worthy pursuit is to take upon its head those sandals, the Upanishads. Bhagavan has said something from on this on talk 647. Each one knows the self, but is yet ignorant. The person is enabled to realize only after hearing the Mahavakya. Hence, the Upanishadic text is the eternal truth to which everyone who has realized owes his experience. After hearing the self to be Brahman, the person finds the true import of the self and reverts to it whenever he is diverted from it. Here is the whole process of realization. Bhagavan, through these verses, is saying that our intellectual knowledge, which fully consists of division and holding on to a limited identity, can be only transcended by getting back into that grace which is here and now, free of all the ignorance. That grace is the verily the self, the Brahman who is within, and the Mahavakyas point to it, saying that Tat Tvamasi, thou art. And in order for us to get acquainted to that truth that we verily are, Bhagavan has given us another Mahavakya, who am I? Through this enquiry, who am I? Every time that we move away from that truth, we are given an opportunity to plunge back into that truth, to get back in touch with that grace. With repeated practice, whenever a thought rises, and no matter what kind of thought rises, whether it is good, bad, or ugly, or how many number of thought rises, all we need to recognize, as Bhagavan is saying here, that we need to do the vichara. We need to remember the Mahavakya. We should inquire, to whom is this? Who am I? And pursue that. That is the real holding of the sandals on the head. We should pursue it with practice and more practice. And when we practice it, the Mahavakya really takes us to the source, takes us to that grace which is here and now, free of all these divisions, all of these intellectual divisions. And by repeatedly getting back to that self, Bhagavan assures that one will gain the strength to remain abided in that truth which alone is. The immense grace of Bhagavan. For the next 10 minutes, let us do Atma Vichara. Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana. Thank you all.
In the satsang, we now have the sharing of the Gita Sara, selection of verses from the Bhagavad Gita by Bhagavan Ramana. This sharing is by Venkatesh Deshpande.
Oh. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kansachanuramardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Oh. Shantakaram Bhujagashayanam Padmanabham Suresham Vishwadharam Gaganasudrisham Meghavarnam Shubhangam Lakshmi Kantam Kamalanayanam Yogiradhyanagamyam Vande Vishnum Bhavavayaharam Sarvalokaikanaatham. Oh. We're doing manana on the Bhagavad Gita Sara. So we have reached the verse number 34 today, which is from the chapter 2, verse number is 55. I request Sapna to kindly chant that, please.
Yes, sir. Ata Srimad Bhagavad Gita Saraha Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Parthamanogatan Atmanyevatmana Tushtaha Stitha Prajnastadochyate Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Parthamanogatan Atmanyevatmana Tushtaha Stitha Prajnastadochyate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sapna. O Arjuna, when once a person thoroughly renounces all his desires, which are based in the mind, and is content in his own self, through the joy of the self, he is called as one steadfast in his mind. Here Krishna gives the definition of a realized person with both positive and negative assertions. He first gives a negative aspect because it is easier to understand. A person of steady wisdom is one who completely abandons all the desires from the mind. That sounds frightening to us. Then Krishna quickly follows it up with a positive assertion to prevent any misconception. He has no desires because he is established in the self alone, by the self. Self means Atman. Atman is the absolute state of Godhood. When you have access to your own infinite status, everything else pales into insignificance. The value of all finite things instantly comes down to zero. He is giving us a definition in the absolute. It is impossible to understand the absolute. Hence, we must come back to our level, understand its meaning and reference to our life, and then extrapolate to understand what he is talking about. He is referring to growth, the escalation from one state of preoccupation to another. We all have been through some form of growth. Today, you are all grown up, but at some point of time, you were a child. And as a child, you were enamored with toys. Today, do you have the same desire? Obviously not. Even if you were offered sophisticated toys that were not available when you were a child, you wouldn't want them. You can confidently declare that you are totally free of all desire for toys. How did this childhood desires go? Did you ever say, I am going to renounce these toys? No. In fact, the toys just dropped out of your life. All you did was to grow to appreciate something higher, something more fulfilling, more tantalizing, more attractive. You made no attempt to get rid of the desires for toys. You merely escalated to a higher desire. A child has desire for toys. As long he is in the state of childhood, you can never persuade him to keep away from toys or to drop the desire for them. One day, the child grows up and encounters the thrills of computer games. Thereafter, he is hooked onto the computer. What happens then to all the toys? He very graciously gives them to his younger brother, who is bowled over by his sense of renunciation. The truth is that he has not renounced anything. He has only discovered something that gives him a greater thrill, and the computer becomes his whole world. Then one fine day, you find that he has no interest even in the computer games. Why? He has fallen in love. And thereafter, everything, the toys, the computer, etc., are meaningless to him. Thus, he grows up into a full-fledged adult. Now he has other passions, desire for money, power, position, status, etc. This is how to escalate to higher desires. Having reached this stage, all you want to do is maintain status quo. But there are miles to go. If you can visualize something beyond what the world has to offer, you gain that perspective which will allow you to move even higher. This is portrayed by Plato's metaphor. There is a society living in a dark, dingy cave. Generation after generation live in the same cave. One day, a smart young man gets up and tells his elders, "Look, there must be something beyond this cave. The whole universe cannot be just this cave. Let us explore." The elders look at each other and say, "He always looked a little odd to us." So they tell him, "You must be tired, go to sleep. Tomorrow you will feel better." Confused but obedient, he follows their advice. Then after a few days, that restlessness again arises within him. He is now convinced that there must be something beyond the cave, and he realizes that the elders are not aware of it. One day, when everyone was asleep, he decides to explore by himself. He sets out and turns a few corners. Soon he finds he is in total darkness. He no longer has the comforting light of the settlement. He has not yet reached the mouth of the cave either. He is neither here nor there. Now that's a frightening condition to be in. But he has a conviction that there has to be a world beyond the cave, which keeps him going. He talks on until he sees a faint light glimmering in the distance. This was the new world beckoning him. His confidence grows and he continues his pursuit with renewed vigor. He finally reaches the mouth of the cave. He comes out in the open world and sees the first time what you and I see every day: the sun, the sky, the clouds, the fresh air, the mountains, the birds, the river, the trees, the animals. He is in ecstasy. He basks in the newfound experience for a couple of days. Then he thinks of his family and community back in the cave. He decides to go back into the cave to bring them out. This is a play also that we do in the ocean and the sea and the river, which we do in Ramana Center. He goes with enthusiasm. He is elated since he's experienced the truth and he cannot wait to share it with others. Back in the cave, he speaks with great conviction. He describes the beautiful world, the green grass, and the bright sun, and stars, and fresh air. They look at each other and say, our doubts are now confirmed. Doubts about what? About his sanity, because he speaks a language that they do not understand. When he describes the sun and the stars, they have no idea what he's talking about, so they think he is mad. Plato beautifully captures the essence of this spiritual journey in this metaphor. There is that inner call of the divine in all of us, which tells us that there has to be something beyond the life we know. And there is that exploratory spirit in us to find. When you embark on this journey, you find that nobody is with you. People mock you for your convictions, and they sometimes act as hindrances to your path of discovering the truth. They think that you're lost, when in fact, they are the ones who are lost. Once you are able to pursue the truth alone, you reach the state where you are out of sync with other people, but you have not yet experienced the higher. You can no longer be content with the worldly pleasures, but you have no access to spiritual joys. You are in no man's land. However, you must persevere nevertheless. Then you get to an indication that you are on the right track. Things start going right in your life. You gain the unshakable confidence that you are on the right path. With this renewed conviction, you continue till you reach realization. Growth takes place in every aspect. When you move from a mere taste to the value of hygiene, then even if somebody tells you that you get delicious bhel at a roadside stall, you will not feel like going. You may like junk food, but the moment you cultivate a desire for health, the sight of oily food is a turn-off. You no longer enjoy it. When you begin to appreciate classy clothing, you cannot go back to gaudy, ill-fitting clothes. Once you get to the higher level, you can never fall back to the lower. You do not regress to the previous stage. The Gita gives you this assurance. Having reached a higher stage, there is no going back. Here in this verse 55, he gives the definition of a self-realized person. This is explained in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad in 3 words. Aptakama, Atmakama, and Akama. Aptakama means all desires are fulfilled. This happens when you have Atmakama, the desire for Atman. The lure of the infinite neutralizes all worldly desires. Then you go to the state of Akama, desirelessness. This is realization. By Bhagavan Sri Krishna and Bhagavan Ramana's grace, may we all reach that state here and now. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya Jai Shri Krishna.
Ramana. We continue today's satsang with a sharing from Dr.Kala Rengasamy.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Arunachalamena agame ninaipavar agatte pereruppai Arunachal. Namo Ramana to all. With the abundance grace of Bhagavan Sri Ramana, we are meditating on Devi Kalotra Jnana Vicharapadana. And in the last satsang we learned that one who is capable of controlling the windy mind is none other than the creator, Brahma, destructor, Shiva, protector, Vishnu. Not only this, he is the Deva Asura Guru, Brahaspati, and the one who is a Jnani. Now in the next stanza, Bhagavan says about the way to control the mind. Yav ubayathinale vayuvir chalana ivulam kattupadumo. The mind, which is very forceful than the wind, can be controlled by any way which is suited. It is not necessary that it should be controlled by any one particular way or ubaya. Mind should be stable, calm. When can that be possible? Only when it merges with the Atman. So Bhagavan says, which way to control the mind is not important. By any way, the mind has to be controlled. Because to realize one's presence, the being, the mind has to be controlled completely. Because along with the mind, the whole world rises. Then the mind identifies the likes, the dislikes, which is good, which is bad. I want this and I want that. What this person is doing good and what the other person is not good or it is bad. Then expectation will come in. Things should happen according to my own wish, and at that juncture, we fail to realize that Ishvara Chittam will only prevail. The problem with us is we are not ready to enjoy the suspenses in life, but we behave exactly the opposite way when we go to a cinema. Before entering the theatre, we see the posters and guess, oh, he is acting, she is also there in the movie, and we ourselves predict something on seeing the poster itself. Oh, this the story might be like this. Once we enter the hall and start seeing the first scene, we say, oh, this is going to happen in the next moment. But it does not happen. Okay, alright. The second scene, we expect, oh, this fellow is going to act like this only. No, he acts differently. Next. All our predictions go wrong. Now, the last climax is coming. Nearly 90% we predicted and that went wrong. Now we predict this is going to be the end of the movie. But to our surprise, the end was completely different. But imagine what will we say when we come out of the cinema hall. We say how wonderful the movie has been taken. It is very super. Not even one of our prediction was fulfilled, but we say the movie was wonderful. On the contrary, if for the first scene itself we predicted the end of the movie, and if it was the same as we expected, then the movie is a flop, really. How this director has taken this movie, there is no suspense at all, isn't it? So, how is it that in life alone, we want everything to happen according to our own expectations? If our expectations goes wrong in a movie, we say it is wonderful. But in our life, if the expectation goes wrong, we cannot bear it. We feel sorrow. We feel very bad. Because we are not able to enjoy the suspense in life. When we learn to enjoy that, there is no place for the mind at all, or the ahankara. Because when there is no expectation, there is no thought, and the mind has to find its own way back to its source. So in this song, Bhagavan says beautifully, find out the way or ubaya that turns your mind inside and merge it with its source. Aduve muktikku ubayam. That that is the only way to realize the truth or mukti. Adave Sadubaya Sar Gunam Thanum. This will be the Swadharma of Mumukshu. Again, Siddha Suddhi, purification of mind, is very important for attaining mukti. To get rid of the power that was due to Purva Karma, people used to go for Tirtha Yatra. So, Bhagavan says the Tirtha Yatra is mind submerging into its source. Again, to come out of all thoughts and mamahara, charity is considered to be the best. But Bhagavan says even that is possible with controlling of mind. With great difficulty, what for sadhakas are doing tapas to purify their mind. Actually, through tapas, what is to be attained? It is manonasha, not the mukti, because mukti is always there. There is nothing new that is to be attained. Moksha is freedom. Freedom from worldly attachments. When mind is controlled, automatically attachments will vanish. So Bhagavan says, follow any ubaya, any marga, and see that the mind is controlled and merges in its source. So Shiva says, hey Parvati, you need not have any doubt in this statement. Just believe in what I said. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. We go on the sharing by Ujwal Jagadeesh of the verses from Ramana Satsang.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. We are meditating on the verses from Ganapati Muni's Ramana Satsang, which have been compiled by Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. धरणीधर जांगमपि त्यजता धरणीतलवासितमोदुतये धरणीधर जांगमपि त्यजता धरणीतलवासितमोदुतये नरवेशभृता नगरन्द्रकृता रमणेन सनाथमिदं भुवनं नरवेशभृता नगरन्द्रकृता रमणेन सनाथमिदं भुवनं गिरिजयमडिलनु सहा त्यजिसीदा धरणीतल वासिಗಳ ತಮಹರಿಸಲು ಗಿರಿಜಯಮಡಿಲನು ಸಹ ತ್ಯಜಿಸಿದ ಧರಣೀತಲ ವಾಸಿಗಳ ತಮಹರಿಸಲು ನರರೂಪ ತಾಳಿಹನು ಗಿರಿಯ ವೇದಿಸಿದವ ನರರೂಪ ತಾಳಿಹನು ಗಿರಿಯ ವೇದಿಸಿದವ ರಮಣನಿಂದ ಪತಿಯ ಪಡೆದಿಹುದಿ ಭುವನ. We saw that the earlier verse and this verse has been set to Neelambari Raga by Srimati Sulochana Natarajan. The earlier verse was talking about the teaching of Bhagavan Ramana, how to get back to our divinity here and now, that state which Ramana is reveling in. How to get back to that state is by attaining that state of sleep when awake, to attain that Jagrita Sushupti, to get back to sleep, being awake, we sing this lullaby, the tune of lullaby, Nilambari Raga, and Bhagavan gives the way to this path to attain divinity here and now is to, by determination and by practice, more practice, and also he has shown that he has left all the mamakaras, we saw this, and he has attained this supreme state of being Bhagavan. And in the next verse, Ganapati Muni is singing of the beautiful relationship of mother and Skanda, the child. So the Skanda is playing on the mother Girije. So this, the cajoling and playing of the mother is beautifully brought out in this Nilambari Raga. We know that Durga, Parvati Devi is worshipped on the days of Navaratri as Navadurgas. And the first Rupa of Navadurga is Shaila Putri, the one who is the Putri of Shaila, the Parvata Raja's daughter. And this Shaila Putri Parvati, and later on the fourth day, we celebrate her as the Skanda Mata. We see that Skanda Mata, the Rupa, she is sitting on a tiger, on a lion, a ferocious lion, and on her lap there is this Skanda who is playing with a javelin which is given by Shakti herself. And we see that Skanda is happily playing on the lap of Girija, but Girija is not satisfied with this. She is playing, and she herself gives the Shakti veil to his hand and says, "Oh, my little son, this is not the purpose. You can play on my lap, but you have come here for a purpose. So you have to go and fulfill that purpose. And then you can come back anytime. My lap is ever available." So she says, and she encourages this Skanda to go and fight the Surapadman and Karakasura. And before that, he destroys the Kraucha Parvata. And we see that how by destroying all these demons who represent the darkness of ignorance, the darkness of ego, the darkness of all the problems that we face, he destroys with his power and he brings light. And that is the purpose of Muruga or Subramaniam. And Ganapati Muni says, this human form whom we see as Bhagavan Ramana is none other than Kartikeya Swarupa, the one who that on law in the long ago, in the day of yore, the one who destroyed this Kraunchagiri, who destroyed the Kraunchagiri, he has come in the human form, and the purpose of his coming is to destroy all the darkness of ignorance of all the devotees. And he, for doing this, he has even given up that comfort, that joy of being on the lap of the mother. Bhagavan Ramana in one of the talks says that our self is Chinmayi, the mother, which is equal to that Parvati Devi, the Durga Devi, who is shining within our hearts as Chinmayi. And the commentators say that from this inert body, which is inert like the mountain, there rises the mother. The mother, she rises as the daughter of this inert body, inert mountain, as the Girije, as the Chinmayi. From this Chinmayi, in Tripura Rahasyam, it is told that there is an analogy that after doing all the day's work, we go back to that lap of Chinmayi, and there alone we get rest. And it is only at the lap of that Chinmayi there is all joy. The Skanda, who rises as the ray of light, as the Ahas Purana from the lap of this Chinmayi, comes out of compassion to save us. He comes in the human form and he saves us. And he shows us the path of getting back to that Chinmayi by destroying all the darkness that we assume that we are. Destroying all the darkness, he takes us to that Chinmayi's lap through the various method, through surrender, and through the self-enquiry which Bhagavan Ramana has given us in the human form. And T.K. Sundaresh Iyer, when he's having a chat with Bhagavan Ramana, he says, I know this shloka on Subramania. Bhagavan, why don't you put, instead of Subramania, put the word Ramana in that place and compose a verse. And Bhagavan Ramana composed a verse with Muruga being replaced by Ramana, where Bhagavan himself is telling his glory that he is the Muruga who destroys the darkness, and he is the one who is the compact light, who is the sun, eternal sun, and that Guha Ramanan is shining in every heart. And let us all sing the glory of this Guha Ramana. Aravo irulai adipon Guhayil urayvon alatta koladon Aravo irulai adipon Guhayil urayvon alatta koladon Nirayoliyon Atishay Jnanavailon Guha Ramananathanai Etuvomyan Ramananathanai Etuvomyan. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the immense grace of that self, manifest as Ramana, we are meditating on the 108 names of Bhagavan Ramana, the Ramana Ashtottara Shatanama, composed by Vishwanatha Swami, and having meditated on the Dhyana Shloka, which describes him as the boundless sea of bliss, of consciousness, apara satchit sukhavari rashet, in whom this entire universe is just a mere speck. Then Vishwanatha Swami goes on to tell us, as Muni had beheld him, that Bhagavan is the Skandavatara, Mahasena Mahomshena Jataha, that Skanda who is the Apara Satchit Sukhavari Rashe. And he has come here to bless us as Ramana, Mahasena Mahomshena Jata Sri Ramana Guruhu. And he's here to bless the entire world as a Guru, which is the Skanda Tattva, which is the essence of Subramania. Because the Muni says, Subramania, you gave Upadesha to Brahma, you gave Upadesha even to our father, Shiva. And you have come now to give Upadesha to Ganapati, your elder brother. He refers to himself, the Muni refers to himself. So he is the Guru. He is the one who is large, the Guru. And he is the one who has come to dispel our darkness. Because he is the Mahaujasa. He is the great light of what? Akhanda Samvidakaraha. He is that great light of the consciousness which is undivided. Akhanda Samvidakaraha. That is his true form. Lest we forget it, Vishwanatha Swami reminds us that his true form, his name is Ramana, but his true form is the undivided supreme consciousness. He is of the form of pure light, Mahaujasaha. But he has taken a human form out of a reason. The reason is Jagat Hitavataraha. He is born for the sake of the welfare of the entire universe. That is the Karana. because of which he has taken the form Karanodbhava Jagathitavataaraha Parashara Kulottamsaha, and he has come in the lineage of the sage Parashara as the son of Sundaram Ayyar, Sundararya Tapaphalam. We saw the greatness of the tapas, of the austerity of Sundaram Ayyar. If such is the fruit that has come from his tapas, what must be his tapas? What must have been his penance? That the fruit is the apara satchit sukhavari. The fruit is Bhagavan Ramana. The fruit is the entirety of the creation. The fruit is the culmination of the creation. The fruit is the absolute bliss of self-abidance, which is what Bhagavan is, which is what Ramana is. So that fruit has come from Sundararya's tapas. And what is the meaning of tapas? Tapaphalam, says Vishwanatha Swami. And Bhagavan has defined tapas for us in Upadesa Saram. He says, Aham apetakam nija vibhanakam mahadidam tapo. The great tapasya is the destruction of the ego and the shining forth of the self. So we see that if Bhagavan is the tapaphala of Sundaram Ayyar, that means that Sundaram Ayyar's ego was completely destroyed. Aham apetakam. And that nija, that truth, nija vibhanakam, that shining forth of that Mahaujasa, that great light of Ramana happened because Sundaram Ayyar's ego had been completely destroyed. And what is that fruit? Because when one, it also shows to us that even if one sincere sadhaka does tapasya and gets the fruit of that tapasya, how does that fruit benefit the entire world, no, the entire universe? So this is an indication to every one of us that Bhagavan says, if somebody abides in the self, that is the greatest good that someone can do to the entire universe. So we find that Sundaram Ayyar's tapas, Sundaram Ayyar must have been abiding in the self, so his tapas bore fruit as Bhagavan. And what greater good can come to the universe than the birth of Bhagavan? Ganapati Muni, while describing in his biography, he has not written the entire biography of Bhagavan, he has written 3 chapters in Sanskrit on the biography of Bhagavan. And he, while describing the birth of Bhagavan, he says there were festivities happening at that time. There was the Ardra Darshana festival. At that moment, he who in himself is the greatest festival to the whole world was born. He who in himself is the greatest festival to the whole world. And today we celebrate so many days connected with Bhagavan as festivals in our lives. We celebrate his birth. We celebrate his Aradhana as well, which is coming just this week. In the coming week, we are getting Bhagavan's Aradhana, the date, April 14. So everything connected with Bhagavan becomes a festival for us. And such is the blessing that the entire universe has got by the fruit of Sundaram Ayyar's penance, by the fruit of that penance. Because Bhagavan has, again, to the Muni, he has explained the true meaning of tapas is abiding at the source of the I, abiding at the source of the mantra. That is the true meaning of tapas. So that true tapas which Sundaram Iyer has performed has brought forth this great fruit. And Bhagavan says, therefore, anyone performs the tapas of abiding at the source, the great fruit of goodness will come to fruition of its own accord. It will happen by that grace, says Bhagavan. So he is Sundararya Tapav Phalam. And what is the next nama by which Vishwanatha Swami hails in? He says, Kamaniya Sucharitraha. He says, very beautiful, pure life is that of Ramana. Kamaniya Sucharitraha. Beautiful, pure life. That is the fruit of penance. If you want to see the definition, what happens when jnana dawns? The fruit of penance is the birth of jnana. The fruition of dharma is the birth of jnana. The fruition of truth is the birth of jnana. The fruition of bhakti is the birth of jnana. The fruition of enquiry is the birth of jnana. And how does jnana manifest? For all of us to see, it manifests as a sucharitraha. We see that in the life of any jnani, one who is established in the self. If we look at the life of one who is established in the self, it is beautiful to see the life of such a one. And we see it in the lives of all the great devotees of Bhagavan as well. Behind me is the picture of cow Lakshmi, and we see that Sucharitra. We see her life is also so beautiful. If you take up the life of any devotee of Bhagavan who is been given the same state by Bhagavan, who has enjoyed the same phala, the phala which Sundaramaiyer gave to the world and is enjoyed by all the devotees of Bhagavan, and that fragrance of the Sucharitra is there in every one of their lives. That's why when Sri V. Ganeshan records the Ramana Periya Puranam, he writes of the stories of a few devotees who are better known perhaps, or whom he has known intimately, but so many stories are unwritten. And each story of every devotee is the story of Bhagavan himself, because he is that fruit. He is that fruit manifesting in the life of every devotee, everyone who seeks him through surrender, everyone who seeks him through enquiry. And of course, Bhagavan's own life, what can we say of its beauty? In this one Nama, Vishwanatha Swami includes the entire childhood of Bhagavan. Kamaniya Sucharitraha. Very beautiful. He's so beautiful that Bhagavan as a child, he was loved by everyone. That fruit of tapas is something which is so lovable because it is of the very nature of love itself. And therefore, it is very sweet and it is loved by all. Everyone in Tiruchuri loved Bhagavan. And that was the main factor of his childhood. Not many things are recorded about his childhood, except that he was loved and he was loving. He was kind. He was kind to everyone. He would take care of the ones who were littler than him. He would take care of his sister. He would take care of his little friend. And he would abide by those laws of dharma, of those laws of bhakti, by those laws of bhakti which his parents had followed. He would be the supreme bhakta even in his childhood. He would show his devotion, but as naturally as Sundaram Iyer did, without any forced regimen about it, because it is so natural to him. Everything is so natural to them, and so that is how the little boy Venkatraman grew up in Tiruchuri, in the sacred Tiruchuri, playing with his friends, taking them to the Kalayar temple on a picnic, swimming there, enjoying the swim in the river, taking waters from the river, pouring them on the Shivalinga as Abhisheka, plucking leaves and flowers from nearby, offering worship to the Shivalinga, and offering whatever food that Alagamma would have packed for all of them as a picnic lunch, offering it to Shiva as Naivedya and then eating. It might be this kind of a spontaneous worship that was performed as if in play. It may be trying to cut a piece of sugar cane for his little friend and getting his own thumb cut in the process, but not at all bothering about it. It may be just signing his name or writing out his friend's name on a piece of paper. It may be walking his sister Alamelu to their grandmother's house and ingenuously finding a way to safeguard her feet from the hot road which they had to traverse, they had to walk on. Apparently they did not have footwear, and making footwear for her from the bark of banana trees and taking her and bringing her back. It may be some small little prophecies which he made, which came true, which made Sundaramaiah wonder, who is this young boy? Like telling his father, Naina, just that pillow, that second pillow on the left in the cart, just take care of it. And Sundaramaiah finds that it is lost in the journey. It may be some small things like that. It may be helping his mother to make appalams. It may be all various little details of his life which were all sweet. And it may be diving into the Tiruchuri tank and also seeing how the waters of the Tiruchuri tank would rise in the month of Magha by marking on the steps and then watching the steps, how the water would rise and rise and rise that month, which marked the original flood in Tiruchuri, which was stemmed by Lord Shiva's trident being pierced there, and how again the waters would subside. It may be any of these simple happenings in the life of Bhagavan as a young boy, which Vishwanatha Swami sweetly describes as Kamaniya Sucharitraya Namaha. But he goes on to mention two special anecdotes or two special aspects of the life of this young Ramana, which was Sucharitra, which is a beautiful happening, including the deep sleep from which he could not be woken, or it could be his climbing the fortress of Dindigul, conquering fortresses like Subramaniam, climbing the fortress of Dindigul along with his friends, and then finding escape routes out of it, like he finds escape routes out of the fortress that is the body. All this play, the entire play of Bhagavan as a child is encompassed by Vishwanatha Swami in the words Kamaniya Sucharitraya Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Radha. We now go on to the chanting of verses from Arunachala Aksharamanamalai by Radha and Ujwal.
Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala, நைந்தழி கனியான நிலை பதத்தில் நாடியுட்கொள் நலம் அருணாச்சலா. நொந்திடாதுந்தனை தந்தனை கொண்டிலை அந்தகனி என கருணாச்சலா. நோக்கிய கருதிமை தாக்கிய பக்குவம் ஆக்கினியாண்டருள் அருணாச்சலா. பற்றிமவிட தலை உற்றிரு முனமருள் பற்றிட அருள் புரி அருணாச்சலா. பார்த்தருள் மாலர பார்த்தில்லை எனின் அருள் பாருனகா சொல்வார் அருணாச்சலா. பித்த விட்டுன்னை நேர்பித்த நாக்கினை அருள் பித்தம் தெளி மருந்தருணாச்சலா. வீதியில் உன்னை சார் வீதியில் என்னை சேர் வீதி ஒன்றனக்கே அருணாச்சலா. புல்லறி வேதுரை நல்லறி வேதுரை புல்லிடவே அருள் அருணாச்சலா. பூமண மாமண பூரண மணம் கொள்ள பூரண மணம் அருள் அருணாச்சலா. பெயர் நினைத்திடவே பிடித்திழுத்தனை உன் பெருமையார் அறிவார் அருணாச்சலா. பேத்தனம் விட விடா பேயா பிடித்தனை பேயனாக்கினை என் அருணாச்சலா. பைங்கொடியானான் பற்றின்றி வாடாமல் பற்று கொடாய்கா அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ 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 அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சலம் வாழி அன்பர்களும் வாழி. அக்ஷரமணமாலை வாழி. நமோ ரமணா.
Namo Ramana. We conclude today's satsang with the Ashtottara Puja to Bhagavan. The puja will be performed at Sri Subramaniam's altar and it will be chanted by Vaibhav and Prarthana and Uma and Ashwini, and the Aarti song will be rendered by Revathi.
Namo Ramana. भारद्वाज विश्वनाथ विरचितं श्री रमणाष्टोत्तर शतनामावलिः अपार सच्चित् सुखमादिराशे यस्योमि मात्रं भुवनं समस्तं गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरं चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि। ॐ महासेन महंसेन जाताय नमः। ॐ श्रीरमणाय नमः। ॐ गुरवे नमः। ॐ अखण्ड संविदाकाराय नमः। ॐ महौजसे नमः। ॐ कारणोद्भवाय नमः। ॐ जगद्पितावताराय नमः। ॐ श्रीभूमिनाथस्थलोस्थिताय नमः। ॐ पराशरकुलोत्तंसाय नमः। ॐ सुन्दरार्यतपःफलाय नमः। ॐ कमनीयसुचारित्राय नमः। ॐ सहायम्बासहायवते नमः। ॐ शोणाचलमहोलीनमानसाय नमः। ॐ स्वर्णहस्तकाय नमः। ॐ श्रीमद्द्वादशान्तमहास्थले लब्धविद्योदयाय नमः। ॐ महाशक्तिनिपातेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः। ॐ परमार्थविदे नमः। ॐ तीव्राय नमः। ॐ पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः। ॐ इन्दुमौलिना पितृमते ततः शोणशैलं प्राप्ताय नमः ॐ तपोमयाय नमः ॐ उदासीनाय नमः ॐ महायोगिने नमः ॐ महोत्साहाय नमः ॐ कुशाग्रधिये नमः ॐ शान्तसङ्कल्पसंरम्भाय नमः ॐ सुसन्दृशे नमः ॐ सवित्रे नमः ॐ स्थिराय नमः ॐ तपःक्षपितसर्वाङ्गाय नमः ॐ फुल्लाम्बुजविलोचनाय नमः ॐ चन्द्रिकासितहासश्रीमण्डिताननमण्डलाय नमः ॐ चूतवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः ॐ चूडिताखिलविभ्रमाय नमः ॐ वेदवेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञाय नमः ॐ चिन्मुद्रिणे नमः ॐ त्रिगुणातिगाय नमः ॐ विरूपाक्षुभावासाय नमः ॐ विराजविचलाकृतये नमः ॐ उद्दीप्तनयनाय नमः ॐ पूर्णाय नमः ॐ रचिताचलताण्डवाय नमः ॐ गम्भीराय नमः ॐ परमाचार्याय नमः ॐ सुप्रसन्नाय नमः ॐ अभयप्रदाय नमः ॐ दक्षिणास्य निधाय नमः ॐ धीराय नमः ॐ दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः ॐ स्वराजे नमः ॐ महर्षये नमः ॐ भगवते नमः ॐ ईड्याय नमः
ॐ भूमविद्याविशारदाय नमः ॐ विमलाय नमः ॐ दीर्घदर्शिने नमः ॐ आप्ताय नमः ॐ ऋजुमार्गप्रदर्शकाय नमः ॐ समदृशे नमः ॐ सत्यदृशे नमः ॐ सत्याय नमः ॐ प्रशान्ताय नमः ॐ अमितविक्रमाय नमः ॐ सुकुमाराय नमः ॐ सदानन्दाय नमः ॐ मृदुभाषिणे नमः ॐ दयार्णवाय नमः ॐ श्रीशोणाचलहृद्भूतस्कन्दाश्रमनिकेतनाय नमः ॐ सद्दर्शनोपदेष्ट्रे नमः ॐ सद्भक्तवृन्दपरिवृताय नमः ॐ गणेशमुनिभृङ्गेन सेविताङ्घ्रिसरोरुहाय नमः ॐ गीतोपदेशसारादिग्रन्थसञ्चिन्न संशयाय नमः ॐ वर्णाश्रममतातीताय नमः ॐ रसज्ञाय नमः ॐ सौम्याय नमः ॐ आत्मवते नमः ॐ सर्वामणिमतस्थानाम् आराध्याय नमः ॐ सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः ॐ आत्मारामाय नमः ॐ महाभागाय नमः ॐ मातृमुक्तिविधायकाय नमः ॐ विलत्ताय नमः ॐ विनुताय नमः ॐ विप्राय नमः ॐ मुनीन्द्राय नमः ॐ पावकोज्ज्वलाय नमः ॐ दर्शनादकसंहारिणे नमः ॐ मौनेन स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः ॐ मृच्छान्तिकरसान्निध्याय नमः ॐ स्मरणात् बन्धमोचकाय नमः ॐ अन्तस्तिमिरचण्डांशवे नमः ॐ संसारार्णवतारकाय नमः ॐ शोणाद्रीशस्तुतिद्रष्टे नमः ॐ हार्दविद्याप्रकाशकाय नमः ॐ अविच्युतनिजप्रज्ञाय नमः ॐ नैसर्गिकमहातपसे नमः ॐ कमण्डलुधराय नमः ॐ शुभ्रकौपीनवसनाय नमः ॐ गुहाय नमः ॐ दण्डपाणये नमः ॐ कृपापूर्णाय नमः ॐ भवरोगविषग्वराय नमः ॐ स्कन्दाय नमः ॐ देवतमाय नमः ॐ अमर्त्याय नमः ॐ सेनान्ये नमः ॐ पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः।
ॐ श्रीरमण भगवते नमः। श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तरशतनाम पूजां समर्पयामि। यस्थाणोररुणाचलस्य पदयो स्मृत्या जनिं प्राप्य तत् दिव्यानुग्रहसुप्रवाहविवशस्तादात्म्यभावं गतः हृन्निष्ठस्वगभीरनित्यतपसा लोकान् पुनास्येकराट् तस्मै श्रीरमणाय ते नम इदं लोकोत्तरज्योतिषे। नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावर्ण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि दर्शन सुख मंगल मुख सकल जीवहित सम्मुख ब्रह्म संघिये नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावर्ण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि सदा तुष्ट सदा हृष्ट सदा शिवानंद पुष्ट परम महर्षि ब्रह्मनिष्ठ समदर्शी नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि ನಮ್ಮ ಮನವದೊಂದು ಕಾಡು ನೀನರಿತಿಹೆ ಅದರ ಜಾಡು ಹಿತವನರಿತು ನೀಡುತ್ತೆಮ್ಮ ಕೊರೆಯ ತಣಿಸಲೈ ಬೇಡಲೆಂದು ಬಂದನ ನೋಡಿಯೇ ತಣಿವೆವಯ್ಯ ಮೂಡಿಗಾರನೇ ಹಿತವ ನುಡಿದು ಪೊರೆ ನಮ್ಮನು ಬ್ರಹ್ಮ ಸಂಘಿಯೇ ನಮೋ 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 ರಮಣ ಸದಾಶಿವ ಪ್ರಭಾವರಣ ನಮೋ ಮಹರ್ಷಿ ನಮೋ ಮಹರ್ಷಿ ನಮೋ 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 ರಮಣ ಸದಾಶಿವ ಪ್ರಭಾವರಣ ನಮೋ ಮಹರ್ಷಿ ನಮೋ ಮಹರ್ಷಿ। बोलो भगवान श्री रमण महर्षि की जय।
नमो रमण नमो रमण
नमो रमण